Wonderful. And welcome again. David Horton here. Honored to be your facilitator for this, our final lesson on Daniel. Wow. So this is week 8 of 8. We've just blown through this 8 weeks straight. Thank y'all for studying with us and for being colleagues in the gospel, uncovering scripture. I'm going to share my screen to this. Let me actually get to our first slide. There we are. There we are. This is not Daniel week 7. It's Daniel week 8. Oops. Oh well. I want to start with just a brief review. So last week we began what is the final section of Daniel. He has this final vision, and it's chapters 10 through 12. It's a vision of the end of this era in Israel's life. It's not the end of all history, but the end of this period of history in Israel's life. Remember, Daniel's writing during a time of oppression in Judaism, the 2nd century BC. We think somewhere between the years 167 to 164 BC, a time when the practice of Judaism was forbidden in Jerusalem. The Greek Empire had ravaged the temple, desecrated it with worship to foreign gods, and killed many Jews in the process. So in this final vision, in chapter 10, an angel who is never named, actually, we just assume it's Gabriel, shows up and tells Daniel of this war going on in heaven. Okay, and this war is between these princes of various nations, princes in quotes. That's the word that the scripture uses. These princes are supposed to be angels. The idea is that every nation here on earth has a corresponding angel up in heaven, almost like a patron saint, if you will, of that nation. Michael, the angel Michael, who we'll get to tonight, fights on Israel's behalf. Michael is Israel's patron angel, if you will. So first, Michael goes to battle against Persia, and Michael beats the prince or angel of Persia in heaven. So that would correspond to a conflict between Israel and Persia on earth. And now Michael's going toe-to-toe with Greece. So that means on earth, there's conflict between Israel and Greece. Okay. Remember, this is apocalyptic literature. It assumes a heavenly realm and an earthly realm. And what happens in one directly influences what's happening in the other. They don't just run parallel to one another, they influence one another. Okay. So Gabriel then, so that was chapter 10. What we covered last week in chapter 11, it was Gabriel just went through this long, complicated history of these wars and marriages and peace treaties, and then wars all over again between these two families, the Seleucid family and the Ptolemy family. Just real briefly, after Alexander the Great died, he had conquered all the known world. His kingdom was broken up into 4 parts. 2 of them maintained the most power, and that would be the Seleucids and the Ptolemies. Seleucids in the northern parts, Ptolemy in the southern part of the empire in Egypt. Okay, what I want you to note, something I want you to note, and we'll come back to this, is these events that Gabriel has covered, these wars between these 2 families, they have already happened. Okay. And when Daniel writes this, he knows these things have already happened, but the angel talks about them in the future tense. The angel talks about them as if they will be happening in the future. Okay. So it's really a way of the angel explaining, hey, there is a reason behind all the crazy times you're living in right now in Jerusalem, or living right now in the US, right? There is a reason to all this. It's all part of this plan that we can't see, because so much of it happens in places that we can't see. In apocalyptic literature, a heavenly realm. So that's why Gabriel goes through things that have already happened as if they're in the future. He is explaining how we got here, how we got to this place. Okay, So I want to do a quick Zoom poll. I think I worked out the kinks from last week. Let's see. Yes, this is going to work out great. I want you to answer this question for me. How comforting would it be to know current events were part of a larger plan? Just pick one. Pick one, okay? How comforting would it be to you to know that current events were part of a larger plan? You've got very comforting, somewhat comforting, little comforting, not at all comforting. I get to see the percentage of y'all who have participated. We're at 63% now. We'll let it go on for a few more seconds. Three-quarters have responded. Almost all the way there. Okay, going once, going twice. Oh, someone just responded. I never know when to stop it because I don't want to cut anybody off. Okay. If you don't get a chance to vote, go ahead and send me a chat. Okay, I'm going to end poll and show you and share the results. Okay, so how comforting would it be to know current events were part of a larger plan? So half of you would say very comforting. Okay, it's about to be expected. Then a lot of variety elsewhere. The other half are going somewhat comforting to not at all. The reason I put not at all comforting is because if current events are part of a larger plan, well, does that mean that God causes the bad times too? Like, is God the cause of all this stuff? And that wouldn't be very comforting at all. I think for Daniel's people and for half of the people here, at least half of the people here on this call, the belief is even the bad stuff in life, the challenging, tough stuff, it's not random and it's not chaotic. There is a force there that will do something with this and even bend it so that it serves a redemptive purpose, so that it works for the good in the long run. So that's why Daniel talks about the past as if it will be in the future. There is a thrust behind history, which Daniel calls God, and I believe is God, bending even the bad stuff, even though I don't believe God causes the bad stuff, even bends the bad stuff so that it actually works out according to God's purposes. Okay. If you can hear my cat in the background scratching at the litter box, welcome to my office. Okay, all right. We will exit out of there. Share screen again. Okay, so we're picking up here in Daniel 11, verse 29. Anybody watches Friends reruns? Got the song Smelly Cat stuck in my head now. Thanks, cat. Chapter 11, verse 29. At the time appointed, he shall return and come into the south, but this time it shall not be as it was before. For ships of Kittim shall come against him, and he shall lose heart and withdraw. He shall be enraged and take action against the holy covenant. He shall turn back and pay heed to those who forsake the holy covenant. Forces sent by him shall occupy and profane the temple and fortress. They shall abolish the regular burnt offering and set up the abomination that makes desolate. I'm just going to pause here. So note how the angel Gabriel is talking here, talks about these things in the future tense. These things shall happen. Well, he's talking about this same king we've come to every week, King Antiochus IV Epiphanes. This Greek king, Seleucid king, who comes from the north, will come in and ravage Jerusalem. Okay, something that will happen in the future. But Daniel's writing this in the present. This has already happened in Daniel's time. So you can see how Daniel right now is making sense of this. All these things serve a kind of plan, and they were foretold, Gabriel is saying. Okay, so Daniel's talking about things, Gabriel's talking about things thus far that have already happened. Okay, verse 32. He shall seduce with intrigue those who violate the covenant, but the people who are loyal to their God shall stand firm and take action. The wise among the people shall give understanding to many. For some days, however, they shall fall by sword and flame and suffer captivity and plunder. When they fall victim, they shall receive a little help, and many shall join them insincerely. Some of the wise shall fall, so that they may be refined, purified, and cleansed until the time of the end, for there is still an interval until the time appointed. Okay, so again, this is King Antiochus. He will, you see here in verse 29, at the time appointed, he shall return and come into the south. This actually happened in history. What happened is Antiochus went down to Egypt. So the Seleucids didn't have control over Egypt. The Ptolemy family did. In history, he goes down to attack Egypt, tries to defeat the Ptolemies down there, and he loses. He loses the battle. This actually happened. This was a battle in 168 BC. I put here, it's where we get the line in the sand image. You know, when you hear someone say, I'm drawing a line in the sand, right? Take a stand. You're either going to be with me or against me. The Ptolemy family in the south had made a treaty with the Romans. By this time in history, the Romans are starting to become powerful. And the Romans send a battalion to fight alongside the Ptolemies and against the Seleucids, namely King Antiochus here. And this Roman general in our line draws a circle in the sand, like in the Egyptian desert, draws a circle in the sand around King Antiochus. He's standing in the sand. The Roman general draws a circle around him and says, if you step outside this line without going home back to where you came from, I will attack. And he makes a believer out of King Antiochus, and he goes home. That's where we get the line in the sand image. So Antiochus leaves Egypt. He has heard at this point that the Jews in Jerusalem are in open rebellion against the Greeks. And so Antiochus, enraged by his shame and humiliation down in Egypt, he actually does, and this is all stuff that happened in history, okay? He goes to Jerusalem, attacks. Some of the Jews, including, there was a high priest named Menelaus, supported King Antiochus. They supported the quote unquote Greek culture in Jerusalem. Okay, they willingly support Antiochus, and they actually are okay with stopping the practice of Judaism. So this is what's all covered in the books of Maccabees. If any of y'all have Catholic family or grew up Catholic, you have in your Bibles, in Catholic Bibles, what Protestants call the Apocrypha. These books that we won't have in our Bibles, but our Catholic brothers and sisters do. So this comes from 2 Maccabees chapter 5, verses 15 through 16. But Antiochus was still not satisfied. This 2 Maccabees tells how Antiochus slaughtered the Jews. He even dared to, but he wasn't even satisfied with that. He even dared to enter the holiest temple in all the world, guided by Menelaus, the high priest, who had become a traitor both to his religion and to his people. With his filthy and unholy hands, Antiochus swept away the sacred objects of worship and the gifts which other kings had given to increase the glory and honor of the temple. Okay. But I love how this passage ends. There's still an interval. Gabriel saying all these terrible things have happened in Jerusalem, but there's still an interval. There's still time. This isn't the end. Okay. It may look bad. It's not over. It's not over until all things are well. If all things aren't well, that means it's not over. There is still an interval. Okay. Verse 36, chapter 11, verse 36. The king shall act as he pleases. He shall exalt himself and consider himself greater than any god, and shall speak horrendous things against the God of gods. He shall prosper until the period of wrath is completed, for what is determined shall be done. He shall pay no respect to the gods of his ancestors, or to the one beloved by women. He shall pay no respect to any other god, for he shall consider himself greater than all. He shall honor the God of fortresses instead of these, a God whom his ancestors did not know. He shall honor with gold and silver, with precious stones and costly gifts. He shall deal with the strongest fortresses by the help of a foreign god. Those who acknowledge him, he shall make more wealthy, and shall appoint them as rulers over many, and shall distribute the land for a price. Okay. See this for what is determined shall be done language here. I'm here in verse 36 to Daniel, and in apocalyptic literature, it just assumes that pretty much all of history is predetermined, and God has mapped everything out. That doesn't really jive well with me, but then again, I'm not an oppressed person. This predetermination or predestination, as some theologians would call it, it doesn't sit well with me. But just imagine you are a suffering, oppressed person, and someone comes along and tells you there is a power out there who's working behind the scenes to fix this, who is not surprised by any of this, but who's going to fix this. And that's the comforting message that Daniel has for his people. Sometimes what I am uncomfortable with as a very privileged person, the oppressed are actually quite comfortable with. They want to hear and believe, and I agree with them, that there is a power out there who's going to fix all this. Again, this king here is Antiochus. Apparently he is a narcissist. Okay, he actually does think he is a god. Perhaps he has a personality disorder. He really might have been. I want to call your attention to these coins. So these are actually coins. I don't know which museum they're in, but this is Antiochus. This is the guy. He had his own coinage minted from the Seleucid part of the Greek Empire. Okay. This text here, all right, if you could read ancient Greek, which I have to study myself, it reads Antiochus, son of God, right? God of God. Actually, it's Antiochus. Yeah, Antiochus, son of God. He actually thinks he is a god. Coinage like this would be common when Jesus comes along, when emperors claim themselves to be gods. Okay. What's interesting about Antiochus is he doesn't worship the usual Greek gods. He worships this really interesting god of fortresses. Let's see. That was in, oh goodness, lost it. No, anyway. 39. Thank you very much. The strongest for, which is not found in any Greek pantheon of gods. It's just not there. It just doesn't exist. And so that could be, it means he borrowed from a god from another culture, or actually what I think he did is he invented his own god. When you have a polytheistic culture, you can just make up your own gods, right? He probably invented his own god to worship to in order to give himself military prowess. So here you just see that King Antiochus is arrogant, and that's going to be the chief sin in the book of Daniel. All of these kings that we've seen. So we started with King Nebuchadnezzar, Babylonian. We went to Belshazzar, the last Babylonian king, and now Antiochus, the Greek king. All of them, their Achilles heel was arrogance. They all thought way too highly of themselves, even to think they were gods. That to Daniel is just the height of sin. So beware. Chapter 11, verse 40, verses 40 through 45. At the time of the end, okay, so now Gabriel, everything we've read so far in this vision has been in the past, making sense of the present. Now Gabriel is shifting to the future. This is what's going to happen in the near future. Verse 40, at the time of the end, the king of the south shall attack him. Okay, but the king of the north shall rush upon him like a whirlwind, with chariots and horsemen and with many ships. He shall advance against countries and pass through a flood. He shall come into the beautiful land, and tens of thousands shall fall victim. But Edom and Moab and the main parts of the Ammonites shall escape from his power. He shall stretch out his hand against the countries, and the land of Egypt shall not escape. He shall become ruler of the treasures of gold and of silver, and all the riches of Egypt. The Libyans and the Ethiopians shall follow in his train. But reports from the east and the north shall alarm him. And he shall go out with great fury to bring ruin and complete destruction to many. He shall pitch his palatial tents, say that 10 times fast, between the sea and the beautiful holy mountain. Yet he shall come to an end with no one to help him. So we turn to the future. This is what Gabriel is saying will happen very soon. In apocalyptic literature, we think that these books like Daniel and Revelation are about things that will happen a long time away. When actually, when they're written, they think this is going to happen like next year or in a few years, not 100 years from now, surely within our lifetime. So Gabriel's saying very soon these events are going to happen. So he predicts that Antiochus will conquer Egypt. That's what this means. So verse 40, at the time of the end, the king of the south, a Ptolemaic king, shall attack him, which would be Antiochus, king of the north. The king of the north shall rush upon him like a whirlwind and expand all the way south. And even here in verse 32, the land of Egypt shall not escape. So Gabriel predicts that Antiochus will conquer Egypt and depose the Ptolemy family. In this battle between these families, like the Capulets and the Montagues, one of them is going to come out on top. So this is one of those things in Daniel that does not happen historically. There's never a time when the Seleucids conquer Egypt. But what does happen is both of these families will end up falling to Rome. So here what Gabriel is predicting is the Ptolemy family will fall. Well, they all fall. All these families fall. They will fall to Rome. So the outcome here is really the same. Most interest here is verse 45. He, meaning King Antiochus, shall pitch his palatial tents between the sea and the beautiful holy mountain. That would be Mount Zion in Jerusalem. He's saying he's going to set up camp in Jerusalem. Yet he shall come to his end with no one to help him. And that is the end of Antiochus. He's gone. I just want you to note, it is one verse. It is like half of one verse devoted to the downfall of evil King Antiochus. But friends, I have spent the last 8 weeks of my life telling you about this person. I have spent the last 8 weeks trying to just telling you about this terrible terrorist of the Jews, a kind of Hitler figure 2,000 years before Hitler. And all Daniel devotes is half of one verse to his demise. We are spared the gory details of what happens to him. It's just, he's going to come to an end and no one's going to help him. Okay. So something similar happens to Revelation. Once we get to the end of the book of Revelation, Satan is dealt with, and it happens just like that. We see all this leading up to it, explaining the events leading up to it, and then it's just over. We're not giving any details, all right? Which I think there's some wisdom to this. The wisdom is we are not to focus on when evil will be defeated, and we're certainly not to glorify any violence of when evil will finally be defeated. We're just supposed to remember that God will deal with evil. God will make sure all evil is defeated. When we read books like Daniel and Revelation, we start to kind of imagine what the end times will be like. And usually they're full of violence, right? And bloodshed. These armies fighting against one another, maybe. And we try to predict when these things will happen, especially when you consider Revelation. Neither Revelation or Daniel gives us any details about when evil is defeated. And Daniel is just half a verse. All we're supposed to hope in is that God will take care of this. I underlined it here. At the very end, Daniel is a message of ultimate hope, not ultimate conflict. And when we read apocalyptic literature, we're to keep that in mind. I want you to go to Menti.com for our final Menti poll of this study. Okay. Let me share. Yeah. All right. Use this code here, 5513025, 5513025. Daniel's about hope. I know we have chapter 12 left to go here. It's very short. Just wanted to go ahead and tell you again, it's about hope. All right. Daniel is not going to describe for us what the end of this evil king will be. He's not going to describe for us how exactly God will deal with all evil in the world. He is simply leaving with us with the message of hope. God will fix everything that is broken. God will mend all things. So I just want to ask you, when you hear the word hope, what do you imagine? And I'll let you all read these. We'll give it another few seconds. The larger the text means the more popular the answer. Okay. In the last few seconds, let me tell you why I did this. So imagine you're in Daniel's synagogue, okay? And you're in Jerusalem and you're totally unsure of the future. And all you're told about how this is going to end is that God's going to take care of it, essentially. What does it say? Yet he shall come to his end with no one to help him. That's all you're left with, that little teeny bit of hope. And I just think that what you're seeing on your screen is likely what those members of Daniel's synagogue would have felt. They would have felt like, okay, there's going to be peace. There's going to be shalom. God's rule over all will happen. Haven't we seen that as a common theme throughout all Daniel? Finally, one day, God will take over all things. God's will be done. These are the emotions of hope. These are the things that Daniel's congregation of Jews would have felt when they heard all this and studied Daniel too. So good job. All right, on to Daniel 12 and the end of our study. So Daniel 12, verses 1 through 4. If you're looking at your Bibles right now, you'll go, my goodness, Daniel 12 is short. It really kind of ends abruptly. Chapter 12, verse 1. At that time, Michael, the great prince, the protector of your people, shall arise. There shall be a time of anguish, such as has never occurred since nations first came into existence. Everyone who was found, but at that time, your people shall be delivered, everyone who is found written in the book. Many of those who sleep in the dust of the earth shall awake, some to everlasting life, and some to shame and everlasting contempt. Those who are wise shall shine like the brightness of the sky, and those who lead many to righteousness, like the stars forever and ever. But you, Daniel, keep the words secret and the book sealed until the time of the end. Many shall be running back and forth, and evil shall increase. What's happening here? So this is still the angel Gabriel talking to Daniel. Now we're talking about the time after the defeat of the Greeks, after the defeat of King Antiochus. So coming down here, essentially, there's Daniel's present time. There's all this suffering under this evil king. Then there's a next time, a time of great anguish. Here in verse 1, there shall be a time of great anguish. So things are going to get worse before they get better, we learn. Then finally, there's the end of time. Okay, we got 3 times: the present time, then the next time, where things get worse before they get better, and then this end of time. What is new here at the end of time is that now Michael is on the offense. Up until this point in the heavenly realm, remember Michael is supposed to be this analog to Israel on earth. Michael's been on the defense. Okay, Michael's been shielding, protecting Israel from other princes, other patron angels. Well, now Michael's switched. Now he's on the offense, which means Israel here on earth is on the offense. The game has changed. All right. We're not told for how long that next time of anguish will last. We're just supposed to know that the faithful will be saved. Note here who Gabriel is talking about. He's talking about those who didn't abandon their faith under Antiochus, those who were faithful, those who kept practicing Judaism even when it was forbidden. Okay, he says here in verse 2, those shall awake from the dust of the earth, and they shall go to everlasting life. Okay, the faithful. And then some will awake and go to shame and everlasting contempt, those who are unfaithful. Hang on to that. I'm going to come back to that in a moment. Apparently, there is a book, okay, here in verse 1. But at the time your people shall be delivered, everyone who is found written in the book, or it would have been a scroll. Gabriel hints at this scroll in chapter 10, verse 21, at the beginning of this vision. This is kind of like the book of life from Revelation. You study Revelation with me. John of Patmos sees a vision of this scroll that only the Lamb can open. Well, this text here in Daniel 12 is where Revelation gets that from. Apparently, there's a book with those who are faithful and those who are unfaithful in it, and you just better hope you're on the right side of the list, okay? What's interesting is Gabriel tells Daniel to keep the book or the scroll sealed until the time of the end. I have no answers for you there. Daniel does not help us out in the slightest as to why that would be. I'd be interested here if you want to go to the chat and just answer why would Gabriel tell Daniel to keep all this a secret, right? Why would he keep this message of what's going to happen at the end of the time a secret? I'm actually not sure, to tell you the truth. So I'd be interested to hear what y'all hear. So all this means that there's going to be a resurrection of the dead, okay? So as I've mentioned to you all before, Daniel gives us the clearest theology of resurrection in the entire Old Testament, okay? The New Testament's all about resurrection. Old Testament, not so much. You only see it a little bit in Ezekiel, and here it's very clearly here in Daniel, okay? It's one of the reasons why I think Daniel is kind of like a prequel or an introduction, if you will, to the New Testament. If you really want to understand the theology leading up to the New Testament, read yourself some Daniel. All this apocalyptic stuff going on, resurrection, you kind of get a sense of, okay, here's the world that Jesus was active in. So all this means is that when once Michael wins all of his battles in heaven, there's going to be a resurrection of the dead. Note that this is not, by resurrection, this is not what we Christians typically understand as resurrection. It's really important to know. This is not a universal resurrection of the dead. As Easter people, as Christians, we believe in a total resurrection of the dead. This is resurrection of just the Jewish people. Okay. But at the time, here in verse 1, but at the time your people shall be delivered, meaning just the nation of Israel, not anybody else, okay? Only the Jews will be resurrected, or so Gabriel says. The faithful will go on to everlasting life. The unfaithful, meaning those who supported Antiochus, those who were totally fine not practicing their religion, will go on to what he calls shame and contempt. No mention of hell or eternal damnation. It's just supposed to be a really unfavorable and unpleasant eternity. So I want you to notice how resurrection is being used. In Daniel, it's a means of accountability. Okay? It is the ultimate justice. For those who are faithful and then die, they will be vindicated in the next life. They will arise from the dead and go on into paradise on this earth. For those who are unfaithful, who did not keep the faith, there will be justice. There will be, you'll have to answer for it, essentially. Not just in death, but in life after death. So resurrection is a means of accountability, or in other words, justice, at least here in Daniel. It's different in Christianity, where resurrection is not a tool for justice. It's actually a means of healing from sin and death. Paul in the New Testament has just a very different idea of what resurrection does. It's not supposed to be a mechanism of justice, not supposed to be a mechanism to punish people or even so much reward people, because resurrection at the end of the day isn't about us. In Daniel, it's about us. It's about what we did in this life, and will we be vindicated in the next life or punished? The New Testament resurrection is about God and about God's victory through Jesus Christ. It's about God healing us, God healing all the human race from sin and death. Also note that there's no mention of non-Jewish people, of people of any other faith or no faith. It's just resurrection is what is supposed to happen to the faithful and the unfaithful in Israel. Okay, let me stop sharing my screen. We have one more Zoom poll and then one more slide. Boom. 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 So how do you feel about what I just said? So in quotes, I put, I believe resurrection is about justice. The righteous will be rewarded. The wicked will be punished. Do you completely agree? Do you somewhat agree? Do you agree just a little? Or do you just completely disagree? I'd be curious to hear what y'all think. Go ahead and vote. Okay, 77% have participated. The results here are just fascinating. Man, I almost want to just continue this study so that we can unpack these results. Oh, this is so great. Okay, I'm nerding out over here. Please pardon me. Y'all are just fascinating people. Okay, just a few more seconds. All right, I'm ending the poll and sharing the results. This is just so fascinating. Huh? Okay, so y'all are split almost evenly. This is great. So a surprising amount see resurrection as a mechanism of justice. I wonder that you don't say anything and don't out yourself in the chat or anything. I'm curious what your experiences with injustice have been in this life. In my ministry with oppressed people, especially refugees and first-generation immigrants into our country, they tend to see what happens in the afterlife as a mechanism of justice, because they have not enjoyed justice in this life. They have just seen so many oppressors go free without any accountability. So I wonder for those who said, I completely agree. Like, what kind of injustices you've experienced in your life, and I'm just so sorry you have. And then you can just take that to varying degrees as you kind of go down. Fascinating, fascinating. Thank y'all very much. All right. Final piece of our study. Daniel 12, verses 5 through 13. Then I, Daniel, so far, ever since Daniel chapter 10, it's been Gabriel talking. Now this is finally Daniel takes the microphone. Then I, Daniel, looked, and two others appeared, one standing on this bank of the stream and one on the other. One of them said to the man clothed in linen who was upstream, how long shall it be until the end of these wonders? The man clothed in linen who was upstream raised his right hand and his left hand toward heaven. And I heard him swear by the one who lives forever that it would be for a time, 2 times, and half a time. And that when the shattering of the power of the holy people comes to an end, all these things would be accomplished. I heard, but could not understand. So I said, my Lord, what shall be the outcome of these things? He said, go your way, Daniel, for the words are to remain secret and sealed until the time of the end. Many shall be purified, cleansed, and refined, but the wicked shall continue to act wickedly. None of the wicked shall understand, but those who are wise shall understand. From the time that the regular burnt offering is taken away, and the abomination that desolates is set up, there shall be 1,290 days. Happy are those who persevere and attain the 1,335 days. Yeah. But you go your way and rest. You shall rise for your reward at the end of the days. And I love that last verse. It's kind of a benediction for us all. So what's going on here? We've got these 1,290 days, 1,335 days. Okay. So there's a man clothed in linen. Apparently, Daniel has had this vision while he's been at a river, and he hasn't told us this until now. Thank you, Daniel. Cynthia put here in the chat, great question. Is this one bank heaven and the other bank earth? No, it's supposed to, great question, Cynthia. It's supposed to be a river bank here on earth. It's like where Daniel is having this vision while he's here on earth. And these angels appear on this river bank here on earth. Okay, so these emissaries from heaven have come to visit him down here. Okay, and Daniel just asks them, one of the angels asks the other angel, well, how long? How long is this going to take, bro, other angel? And that's the same question that Daniel's people in his synagogue would have wanted to know. How long must we endure all this persecution and suffering? And the answer that this other angel gives is so almost unhelpful. A time, 2 times, and a half a time, or 3.5 times. And in my study and preparation for tonight, I have found 2 meanings for that. You could take that metaphorical, or if the number 7 in Judaism represents forever or totality, then 3.5 times in quotes would represent just half of forever, meaning not suffering won't last forever, but it's going to last a long time, and it's going to feel like half of forever. So what this could mean, the angel could be telling Daniel, your current time of suffering is going to last a long time, but just have hope, it won't be forever. Or this 3.5 times, he means it literally. If you take these times to mean years, 3.5 years. It does turn out in history that Antiochus's suppression of Judaism lasts for right about 3.5 years. His kind of tyranny, suppressing Judaism, setting up worship to other gods in the temple, lasts about 3.5 years, from like 167 to 164 BC. And if you were to pull out a calculator and do some quick math, 3.5 years is about, not total, but then again, not precisely, but then again, Daniel is not being precise in the first place. 3.5 years is about 1,390 days. Okay. He says, so he gives these two numbers here in verse 11, then verse 12. From the time that the regular burnt offering is taken away and the abomination that desolates is set up. So from the time that Antiochus stops practice of Judaism in the temple, taking away the burnt offering, to the time that this abomination is set up, which is worship of Zeus in the temple, there's going to be this 1,290 days. Okay. He's saying if you can persevere longer than that, just a little bit longer, okay, you'll make it to the end. Happy are those who persevere just a little bit longer. 1,335 days, just a little bit longer than that. Okay. And that's what I think he's saying. There's going to be about a 3.5-year period where it's going to be really hard to be a good practicing Jew. If you can just be faithful until the end and even a little bit longer than that, you'll be rewarded. Okay. So finally, the message is about how long the suffering under Antiochus will last. And I do think reading this here in 2021, it's about our suffering, right? Our suffering in this time is going to last about half of forever. At least it's going to feel that way. The pandemic has felt like it's lasted half of forever. Just this long, long time. But the good news is it's not forever. There will be a time where we get to rest from all this. I want you to look at chapter 12, verse 13 with me. Our final verse. I want you to imagine this angel telling this to you. When you wonder, hey, when are we ever going to get out of the pandemic? When is this going to end? It is not for us to know exactly when. But this is for you. But you, go your way and rest. You shall rise for your reward at the end of the days. Just be faithful in this time. Know that God is in charge, and God will bend all of this to make it turn out for the good. And one day we will all rise for our reward. Thank you for being in Bible study with me. It's been a pleasure and honor to teach y'all again. Thus concludeth our class on Daniel. Friends, please come to our Advent study. Pastor Tom Pace and I, Senior Pastor St. Luke's, will be co-teaching just a little 3-week class on Wednesdays. Goodness, I think it's at 8:30. It'll be Pastor's Bible Study after hours. So, and we mean after hours. It's going to get interesting at 8:30. We'll be covering the nativity story according to Matthew. So that'll be starting up in a few Wednesdays at 8:30. And then in January, I'll be leading a class on Revelation. It's been such a great honor to be with y'all. God bless you. Keep up the relationship. If you ever need a pastor in your life, I'm an email away. God bless you and take care.